So it's lesson 4, part 2, and we spent some time in the first part of class starting to design our database model. We use draw.io to draw a little bit of a diagram. So maybe I could ask somebody who was in group 1 if you could share either in the chat or in Pastebin, if you could share with us the content of what does our book model look like. No problem, Drew, that's fine. It happens. I had them myself. Not to worry, this wasn't for grades. Not a problem. Glad you made it back. So whatever's easiest. Yep, no problem, Luke. Chat or Pastebin, whatever works. I may want to massage it a little bit, but okay, so let's go ahead and add. So in our model class, let's go ahead and add a new class. So in your Solution Explorer, like we did a couple weeks ago, just right-click your Models folder, click Add, and choose Class. And we're just going to call our class Book with a capital B, and it should be singular. Again, like in Java.NET, model names are singular by convention. So we'll get this public class Book. So first we'll set up an int book ID, and everything, all our properties are going to be in Pascal case. You could call it ID as well, just capital I, capital D, as group 1 did. That's fine. I'm going to use book ID just to be consistent because we called the primary key field category ID. So I'll just follow that same naming convention. But if you wanted to use just ID, that's fine. And then we'll set out. Okay, yep. But hang on, Preston. Thanks. We'll do one at a time. So we've got an author. We certainly will want a title. Just for simplicity, normally we could have the publisher, but we'd probably put that in a separate table and then we're going to have to set up another relationship. Maybe just for simplicity, I'll leave that one out. Although you're right, we would normally have it, and you can put it in if you want. I'm just trying to skip having to create a publisher's table. We could have an image. We certainly will need a price for our books. And yet we could have all of these: fiction, non, audio, visual. You can use any of these. I'll maybe just add the, just for simplicity, I'll maybe just add one of the Boolean fields, maybe for mature content. If you want to add the other ones, nothing wrong. Ideal, yeah, we could add the publish date. We could add a description. Yep, all of those. So you don't have to use my model exactly. I think this is sufficient for us to build the store, but absolutely, if you want to add any of other fields, your properties don't have to look exactly the same as mine. And then we also wanted the foreign key. So this is going to be an integer, right, of category ID. So every book, we want to choose a category and store that field. We may also want to add a few validation rules. Any validation that you could see we should put in our model on any of maybe these fields? Well, yeah, Ivan, it's automatically going to get validated because that's the primary key field. So for the primary keys, we don't have to worry about validating it. It automatically is going to get generated. Yeah, ideal, I agree. So the strings shouldn't be empty. So we want to use the required attribute. We might also want to set the length. How many characters per author? Maybe we want 100. I won't set it for the title. Our image is not going to be required. And our price, we'll want to use a range that not less than 1 cent. I'll put all this code up on Pastebin in a minute. And notice we've got these red errors here. We need to make a reference so that we can use these attributes. So if I just use the code hinting here and choose to add this using statement to system.componentModel.data annotations, this should clear up our errors. So I'll just click on that. Visual Studio adds this reference up here on line 3. So this is probably good enough for now. I'll put my class just in the chat if you want it. And again, if you want yours to look somewhat different, if there's other attributes you want, there've been some other good suggestions in the chat. By all means, you know, this is part art, part science. No two developers are going to design a class the exact same way. I think this will suit our purposes. So there was our book model. Maybe I could ask somebody who was in breakout room 2 if they could share the order detail model that your group mapped out. We can use that as a starting point. Thanks, Megan. If we need to make any adjustments to it, we can. Okay, so I'm going to copy. I'll just copy the inner contents. And then I'm going to make a new class. So a new model. Again, I'm going to add a class that I'll call order detail. But remember, our model names are singular. So I'm going to leave off the S. Because the convention, when we use our migrations, Visual Studio will generate all the tables in the database with plural names. But the model classes should be singular. So add an order detail. Notice there's no S. Whoops, I created the wrong. Sorry, I named this incorrectly. This is supposed to be the cart item. That's okay. Cart. So I'm going to rename my class as cart item, and I'm going to rename my file. Or I could just recreate it. So this should be cart item. Okay. So okay, let's go back to our diagram here. I think we may need to make some structural changes here because these fields are kind of referring to the cart as a whole. But what we need this table to track actually are the individual items in someone's cart. So every time they click add to cart, it's going to add a new record in this table. So let's go and look at our relationship in the diagram. So every time a user clicks add to cart on a book, we're creating a new record here. So what things do we need to store in the database for each item that goes in the cart? I would suggest a lot of these would be for the whole shopping cart. These wouldn't be the individual items. So what do we need to know every time someone clicks add to cart? Okay, so yes, and maybe we use double in the other, so we'll just call it, yeah, we'll have an item price. Okay. The primary key name has to match the model name exactly with the suffix of ID. So I'm going to call that cart item ID. So these match. So we need to know the price. What else do we need to know when someone clicks add to cart if we want to record that transaction? Right. So we need to know, we can maybe just call this quantity, right? How many of this book do they want? They want 1, do they want 10? What else do we need to know? So we know how many they want, what the current price is. I think there's 2 more things we need. We've got this relationship here. Right, we need the foreign key. Which book is it? Thanks, Sam. So we'll have our book ID. Sorry, Megan, you're right. We're pasting, and you did tell me that. I apologize. I didn't see that. Okay, so you've got the book ID here. Yep. There's one more thing we need to know. So they click add to cart. They're putting this book at this price in this quantity in the cart. There's one other field we need here. What if Sam and Megan go to buy the same book at the same time? They each buy 1. So they're buying the same book, the same quantity, the same price. Could be, yes. We could have the date. But what if you put it in at the exact same time? So same book, same quantity, same price at the same time. There's something else we'll need to record in here. Right. Whose cart is it? So, and I'll explain this a little bit later, who the customer is. Thanks, Luke. So that if Sam and Megan buy the same book at the exact same time, we're going to get 2 records in the cart items table, but one is going to belong to Sam and one is going to belong to Megan. I know normally our foreign keys are integers. We'll look at why it's going to be a string. The customer ID is kind of a special field. So we'll look at that. And maybe here, I'm just going to change this to say date added, because it's not ordered yet, right? It's only in their cart. It's only ordered when they actually check out. So there's the cart item class, or at least one version of it. Again, if you want to modify it, that's okay. You can modify it. Okay, so Preston, you were just ahead of us. Now we can go and create the order model. So again, we'll add a class. I'll call it order singular. So Preston, the primary key, you've got it as order number, but again, to follow the naming conventions, we either need to call it just ID or order ID. So I'll use the convention of the model name plus ID. There's our primary key. Again, the customer ID, and I'll explain why, is going to actually be a string in this case. We've got, yep, the purchase date. So for the address and customer info, unfortunately, we probably have to break these down into separate columns. We could just store the address as one text field. The challenge is it would make it very difficult to search, to query, and to organize. So for example, we want to identify all the orders going to Ottawa. It would be better if we broke out that address, or we could check by area code or postal code if we break out the address into a number of separate fields. And same with customer name. Again, we probably would want to break that up into first name and last name. It would make searching much easier. So I'll put this stuff up on Pastebin. So we need first name, last name, address. We want the city, province, and postal code. And we should probably make all of these fields required. I mean, this we're just going to auto set, so we don't have to worry about that. Same with the customer ID. But we're going to want users to actually fill in their name and address. We'll set the province as 2. The postal code max is 7. And the phone maybe is, I don't know, 15. So all these fields are going to be required. We're going to need to make the same reference.
So sorry, I just have a question.
Sure.
Why would the phone be a string?
Okay, excellent question. And there's several answers to that. I would recommend phone numbers should always be strings and not numbers, not integers. Why? There's a few good reasons why it should be a string.
So on the top of my head, I would say it's easy to format it.
Okay, that's one. Yep, that's true. Anybody else? Yes, Ivan, that's a good point. Someone has an international phone number. They need to be able to start it with a plus character. Yep, true. What about a phone number like this? Yep. So the formatting, yeah, Ivan, that's the big one. Even though they're typically digits, we're not doing math with it. We don't treat these things like numbers, right? We're not going to average our customer phone numbers together. It's totally meaningless. Phone numbers are actually strings. We just use digits for the characters most of the time. So also, this would allow us, if it's a string, it allows us, for example, easily to, let's say, search on an area code if it's a string. If you treat it like a number, you'd have to do a conversion. So I would recommend that you should never treat phone numbers. They should never be stored in the database as numbers because they're not actually numeric values. It's text data where 99% of the time the characters are digits rather than alpha characters. The deal, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
I mean, some developers may disagree with me, but typically you will see in databases that phone numbers are stored as strings. So now I'm going to add my reference here. I'm going to add one more field, which we'll use later, which won't be required, but I'll put it in as payment code. So later on, hopefully we're going to be able to integrate Stripe, the Stripe payment gateway. When we send a transaction to Stripe, Stripe will send us back a payment confirmation code, and we can attach that transaction to the order. So this way, if a customer calls and says, hey, I got this payment code and I don't know what it's for, we can look up their order based on their payment transaction. So I will put this all up on Pastebin. It's a fair bit there. So there's our order class. And then we just need the order detail class, which is going to be very similar actually to cart item. Almost the same, really, as our cart item. It's just the cart items are while someone is shopping, and order details is after they check out and pay and create an order. Thanks, Austin. So I'll add my final model, which is order detail, singular. And I'll grab I'm just sharing brute force Pastebin link. So I'm just going to copy the content inside of the class. And we may have to massage it a little bit. Okay, so one thing I'm going to change here is I'm going to take out the S in our primary key field, because again, the class is called order detail singular. The primary key will need to be called order detail. And it's got to be in Pascal case for Visual Studio to kind of do its magic. It doesn't know this is a primary key field unless it's exactly the model name singular with ID. So same with our two foreign keys. I'm just going to change the D on each of those to lowercase. So we've got our two foreign keys. Our price column, what should we change the data type to? It is numeric data, but probably not an integer. Yeah, let's make it a double so that we can include fractions, right? We can include cents. We've got an integer of quantity. For now, I'm just going to remove the used item. That might even be a property of the book, of the books table. So I think this is all we need. The order, the specific book, the price, and the quantity. Date ordered, I'm going to remove that as well because we can get this from the parent. If the order has a date, then we automatically know the date of any of the items on the order. So we don't want to have any fields that aren't unnecessary because it takes up database storage and storage costs money. So I'm just going to remove that one. So there's our simple order detail class. This I'll just put in the chat because it's nice and small. So which order was it? Which book did they buy? What price did they pay? And how many items did they want? Now I'm going to push this stuff up to GitHub, but there's one more thing we'll still need to do here with our models. And I think, Megan, I think your group already did it in yours. I'm just going to go to my Git changes. It's lesson 4, part 1, initial model design. So I think I've put everything in the chat or on Pastebin, but I've pushed to GitHub if you need it. So we have our foreign key fields, but we also need to model the relationships we have between two models. So I'm just going to grab Megan's link again. So notice here, for cart items, not only are we referencing the book ID, but we've also got a reference to the parent class of book. So I'm going to go and add that to my, we'll start in cart item. So here's our foreign key. And here's our parent reference. Oops. So every cart item has a parent object that's of type book. You can't create a cart item if there is no matching book. So we're going to add this parent reference to the cart item. We'll then go to our book model, and we need to add the reference on the other side. So this is the child referencing its parent. One book can be in many cart items. So the child reference is of type list. So this is the other side of the relationship. The parent object is related to a list of the child objects. And then we need to do this similar modeling in all of the other relationships. So this is where our diagram is can be helpful. So we've modeled both sides of this relationship. One book, many cart items, one cart item, one book. Price. We want to model this relationship as well. One category is many books. One book is in one and only one category. So first we'll start on the parent side. Our category model is going to have a child reference. So one category can have a list of books as its child property. We'll then need to go to the book model and add the parent reference. So whenever we've got models that are related, we need to make these references on both the parent and the child side. So add line 18, your child reference. This is in the category model that we made last week. Actually, we made it 2 weeks ago. Once you've added this reference, we need to model the other half of this relationship in book.cs. So every book has a single category as its parent. So book is in the middle of two different relationships. With category, book is the child. With cart items, book is the parent. So add your parent reference here. So we've now represented both sides of this relationship and both sides of this relationship. We still have two more relationships we need to model, which are books to order details and then orders to order details. I realize there are more fields here, but we get the idea. So book is the parent to cart items, but book is also the parent to order detail. So the book table is really the heart of the whole database, isn't it? It's a child of category, and it's a parent to both cart items. Whoops. Parent of cart item and parent of order detail. So we've modeled one half of this relationship. We need to go add the other half of the relationship. So our next step will be to go to order detail and add a reference to the book parent. So every order detail must be related to one book. So wherever we see a foreign key, we're going to have one of these parent references. We've got two foreign keys here. We've got a book ID and an order ID. Because the order details table is a junction between book and order. So it's got two parents, two foreign keys. And then the last reference we need is the parent side of order details. So one order can have many order details. I can buy 4 different products all on one order. I'm going to get one record in the order table, but 4 different records in the order detail table. So I'm going to go to order and add my child reference. And this is going to be a list. Okay. Now our models are complete. We've figured out the 5 models classes we need. We've defined the properties and some of the validation rules in each. And we've identified the relationships, the nature of those relationships, and included those relationships in our model classes. So when you are working on your assignment 2, this part of it is probably the most amount of brain work you have to do. It's looking at, what am I trying to build? What models do I need? What does each model look like? And what relationship is there between the models? I will push everything to Git again. This is models with our relationships. So if you missed anything, I tried to go at a reasonable speed, but if I went too fast or you missed something, the models are on GitHub. So if we look at a few of the sample projects, for example, so here we've got a movie rating repository. So there's going to be a movie model, probably a genre model, and a rating model. So this developer will have to define those models and then determine the nature of the relationships between them. Here we're going to have games and reviews. So here we've got novels, so sort of similar to what we're doing a little bit, maybe a little more than I would have liked, but anyway. Didn't know we were building a bookstore at the time. Here we're going to have, an album model, artist model, song model. So you'll have to define those models and figure out that relationship. Probably going to be one artist, many albums, one album, many songs, for example. So this same process that we've just done kind of collectively and collaboratively, that's what you're going to do on your own in your assignment. Yeah, that's fine a deal. No problem. I'm sure you will make it different enough from what we're doing, because we're doing purchasing and you're doing rating, reviews. You got genres. It's different enough. It's good. Don't worry. So this little website, draw.io, it can help you. I think for a lot of people, having the diagram helps. So again, here we'll have, what do we got? So, yep, you can use this to diagram it out. If you need help designing your model and figuring out the relationships, then send me an email or make an appointment, and I'm happy to help you with this process. Okay, so most of your application design is actually happening right here. So we're almost ready now to use the migration tool to copy this to our database. We still have a couple more small things to set up. We have 2 more steps before we can do that. Now it's 2:50. All the code is already up on GitHub. So I'm going to suggest let's take a break here until 3 o'clock. When we come back, we're going to add our database connection to the web project. We need to add some global references to all of our models. And then we should be ready to actually let Visual Studio build out the database for us. So we will do that when we come back in 10 minutes. All of the code that we've already done so far, it's all on GitHub. So feel free to grab and a reference to anything that you need there. And we will come back in 10.